This is Larry Will of Mount Airy, Maryland, and you're listening to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM, Montreal.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, November the 2nd. Yes, we are into November 2nd, 2025. Thank you for tuning into our show. My name's Sheldon. I'm here with Jill, and we have our usual 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio. Lots of different things going on as usual this week, so we'll get you caught up on everything. And we'll have a great big long list of special DXPEDITION ham stations that'll be coming up over the next week or so. So we'll get to that later on in the show. But before we do anything, Jill, we should tell people what time it is actually, because it's that time of year that comes up twice a year.
Yeah, that's a good question. What time is it? So, this is the weekend where we, of course, changed our clocks, fall back 1 hour. And that also means that it has an impact on what time you're listening to our show. So basically, it's still 10:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, but now we're at 15:30 UTC. So that means that from now on, it's always 15:30 UTC.
Yeah, we always like to remind people of that. If you forgot to change the clock overnight and you didn't realize it, and, everything is thrown off a little bit. So just remember that our local time for the show doesn't change, but definitely the UTC adjusted by the 1 hour. So 15:30 UTC, as Jill said. And if you did miss it, well, you've always got our YouTube channel where you can go and catch the show later on at your convenience or on the CKUT archives. And was it last week we had someone say that there was a little bit of a glitch at the beginning of the show, a couple minutes or something?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, there was like the first, I noticed that even on the archive, the first 3 minutes were missing. And but then after that, the show just starts like random. And it's not a recording because my recording on the computer is fine. So I guess it's in the processing of the computer at CKUT something happened.
Well, again, that's why, it's good to have the YouTube channel. And if anything does go wrong, if your streaming's not working or what have you, you can always go there and get the program. And we should remind people once again about that special edition that we put up on the YouTube channel, the interview with Joe Temecki down in Vermont, talking about the public radio system and what have you. So if you haven't checked that special edition out, you should check that out as well. It's getting good reaction. Thank you for the comments that we received about the show as well.
Yep.
All right, so we start off today with some sad news and difficult week in Philadelphia radio. Two very well-known announcers passed away in the same week. And the stories are getting a lot of media coverage, not just in Philadelphia, but widespread. The first one, Philadelphia rock radio icon Pierre Robert dies at age 70. And this comes from Nick Langan at Radioworld. Legendary voice of Philadelphia 93.3 WMMR FM, Pierre Robert was found dead Wednesday. He was 70 years old. Police found Robert at his home in Gladwine, Pennsylvania, following a welfare check after he did not show up for his on-air shift. WMMR's owner, Beasley Media, said in a statement that the cause of his death was unknown, but that no foul play was suspected. Robert joined WMMR in 1981. Station afternoon host Brett Porsche said on Wednesday that Robert embodied peace, love, and rock and roll, more synonymous with the genre than perhaps any other on-air host in the city's history. People would ask, what about Pierre Robert? I would say he is one of the true legendary rock DJs in the country today. WMMR's Steve Morrison of the Preston and Steve Morning Show told Philadelphia's WPVI television. Preston and Steve emotionally took to the air on Wednesday during the midday shift to announce Robert's passing. The station remembered Pierre throughout the day, featuring some of his favorite songs. While he held a variety of shifts throughout his WMMR tenure, most recently he hosted middays from approximately 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., what he would refer to on air as Pierre's Standard Time. His regular on-air features included Pierre's Vinyl Cuts and the Noontime Workforce blocks. He conducted long-form interviews with an extensive number of artists ranging from the likes of Mick Jagger to Bon Jovi and to Dolly Parton. "We all have heavy hearts today," said Beasley Media CEO Caroline Beasley. Pierre's unwavering love for music and his deep connection with listeners made him one of radio's most enduring and beloved voices. Robert was a native of Truckee, California. He got his on-air start at the legendary progressive rocker KSAN-FM in San Francisco. Not long after the station changed format in 1980 to country, he headed east. While the city of brotherly love is known for being provincial, it did not take long for its listeners to embrace Robert. He told Mainline Today that his number one music moment during his time in Philadelphia was the July 13th, 1985 Live Aid show at JFK Stadium. Robert was also known for his good heart and time for charities. He hosted an AIDS walk and supported Mana's Pie in the Sky fundraiser regularly on air, along with the station's other charities, such as the Camp Out for Hunger. Delaware Valley listeners also fondly listened to his annual broadcasts on Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. So sad story there. Not really sure what happened there. 70 years old and found passed away in his home.
Yeah, sad news, and it looks like he was really a legend there. So in our next news, we continue with some sad news. Longtime KYW Newsradio anchor Harry Donahue dies at 77. This is by Mike DeNardo, a KYW Newsradio. Longtime KYW Newsradio anchor Harry Donahue has died at 77 years old after a bout with cancer. KYW Newsradio confirmed the news with Donahue's family on Wednesday. Donahue joined KYW Newsradio as a freelance reporter in 1974 and became an anchor in 1979, beginning a 35-year run as a morning drive and sports anchor. Countless Philadelphians came to know Donahue's voice as he brought the news, traffic, weather, and much longed-for snow days over the airwaves in his time at the station. He was also a fixture in the city's sports radio scene, doing play-by-play for the Philadelphia Stars, the city's USFL team, in the 1980s. And was the TV and radio voice of Temple football and basketball for more than 2 decades. Donahue was also the host of Comcast's Sportsnet's Inside Golf. He also had 15 years at NFL Films and was the occasional TV voice for Philadelphia Eagles preseason games, Atlantic 10 basketball, and Philadelphia 76ers. He retired from news radio in 2014 and was promptly inducted in the KYW Newsradio Hall of Fame. In 2000, Donahue was inducted into the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame. When celebrating the station's 60th anniversary, Donahue called himself the luckiest fan in the world, as someone born and raised in Philadelphia's only neighborhood who gets a chance to cover these types of teams, these types of individuals in the city where they grew up. Donahue said, "That was the special part for me." Once again, and it hits Philadelphia also. This is kind of a sad week for radio in the Philadelphia region.
Yeah, both dying on the same day, which is even stranger.
Yeah.
But I do remember Harry Donahue from DXing KYW. You would hear them early in the mornings in the winter when it was still dark. We could pick them up here in Montreal. And in the evenings as well, they were a clear channel station on 1060 kilohertz. And the station is still there if you want to check them out. Our next story comes from the New York Times, written by Minho Kim. Radio Free Asia will halt news operations amid shutdown. Radio Free Asia, one of 4 federally funded news organizations the Trump administration has aimed to close, will shut down its news operations for the first time since its founding in 1996, removing one of the few independent journalism outlets in Asian countries with limited press freedoms. On Friday, the organization began laying off dozens of its remaining journalists, closing its regional offices in large Asian cities like Istanbul and Yangon, Myanmar, and halt language services targeting China, Vietnam, North Korea, Myanmar, and Cambodia. The news group's expected closure can be attributed to the Trump administration's broad efforts to cut federal funding and to the government shutdown, which is entering its fifth week. Though it will still exist as a shell of its former self, it is unclear if or when Radio Free Asia will resume its news operations, even after the government reopens. Instead of passing a new budget or a new appropriation of any variety, the government shut down, said Cameron Lang, a general counsel at Radio Free Asia. So there's no money coming through. Until this month, Radio Free Asia and other federally funded newsrooms had successfully resisted attempts from Trump officials to render them obsolete after President Trump signed an executive order requiring the closure of their oversight agency, the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Courts have issued rulings ordering the administration to disperse funding Congress had allotted for the most recent fiscal year for Radio Free Asia and two other private nonprofit news groups that depend on federal dollars. Those organizations had to make steep cuts to their programming and staffing, but they kept some news services in local languages for listeners in countries with repressive governments. But with its funding nearly exhausted, Radio Free Asia will become the second federally funded newsroom to halt news operations after Voice of America. As a federal agency, VOA stopped all news production after the shutdown began, even though it operated during past lapses in federal funding, when it was designated as essential to national security. Critics of the administration's efforts to shutter federally funded news groups have warned that ceasing their news broadcasts would cede ground to Russian and Chinese propaganda networks that have moved aggressively to fill the vacuum. The two U.S. adversaries each spend billions of dollars a year to disseminate content favorable to their governments, including disinformation, according to a recent State Department assessment. The U.S.-funded newsrooms receive around $850 million in 2024. Radio Free Asia has garnered widespread recognition, including awards for reporting on China's human rights abuses of the Uyghurs, widespread resistance in Myanmar against a military junta that staged a coup against a democratic government in 2021, and the perilous journey that North Koreans have risked taking to escape their country. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. Before the Trump administration puts its funding in jeopardy, Radio Free Asia reached nearly 60 million people every week in 9 languages. Voice of America had a weekly audience of 360 million, broadcasting in 49 languages. The two other private nonprofit news groups, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, are still producing news content using the funding they received from the previous fiscal year. But they have also been forced to conduct layoffs and reduce news coverage. The website of Middle East Broadcasting Networks counted a drop in visitors from 8 million a month to fewer than 300,000, according to internal metrics provided by the network. A bill that would keep the government funded largely at the previous year's spending levels would, in theory, provide funding for Radio Free Asia and other nonprofit news groups. But the Trump administration can again move to cut funding, as courts only barred it from doing so in the previous fiscal year. In April, Judge Royce C. Lamberth of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia prohibited the administration from terminating funding to Radio Free Asia and the two other nonprofit news groups. According to court filings, the administration wanted to unilaterally pause funds for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which has the same funding structure as Radio Free Asia, and shut down parts of its programming, moves that Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty argued were forbidden by Congress to ensure journalistic integrity. So this is not good news. Certainly disappointing news, I'm sure, for a lot of these nations and groups of people around the world who really relied on these broadcasts from Radio Free Asia.
In the world we live today, it's extremely important to have the best news sources available.
It's important that they did point out, though, in this article that if those stations aren't there, that probably Russian and Chinese broadcasts are going to fill the void.
Yep.
And that's happened. We've seen that happen already with many stations leaving the air, and suddenly additional Russian and Chinese services popping up, funded by their governments. So maybe that will make someone realize what's happening, because you sometimes wonder domestically, how much do they really understand about what's going on in the rest of the world with these broadcasts? So hopefully somebody is reading an article like this and maybe having some second thoughts.
Yeah. So what is happening with our sun? Well, our sun this week had a coronal hole that would actually send a lot of solar wind towards the Earth. So in the past week, we've been under some unsettled to G1 class geomagnetic storming from time to time. But things in the week ahead might actually be a little different, hopefully, as that coronal hole is moving away. There's not a lot of sunspots on the sun, and none of them are really dangerous for any flares. So hopefully this is going to be the week ahead, a quiet week, but overall good conditions. Sunspot number 68, the solar flux is 120. And in order to witness if propagation is good or bad, you need a radio and you need to turn it on.
You are listening to the International Radio Report. Your reactions are much appreciated. Feel free to send them to radioreport@yahoo.com. That is radioreport@yahoo.com. Thank you.
So in our next story, the Global Radio for Resilience Initiative calls for submissions. This is via Radio Info Africa. The Global Radio for Resilience Initiative, led by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the UNDRR, in collaboration with regional broadcasting unions, including the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, ABU, African Union for Broadcasting, AUB, Caribbean Broadcasting Union, the CBU, and the European Broadcasting Union, the EBU, seeks to highlight the enduring importance of radio as a trusted, accessible, and inclusive communication tool in disaster risk reduction. Radio serves three essential functions in community resilience. One is reach at risk and remote populations through a free-to-air, easily recoverable infrastructure. The second is provide reliable and timely information when other communication channels fail. And the third one is build community dialogue and thrust through interactive programming and participatory approaches. Despite these strengths, radio's contribution to resilience is often underappreciated in disaster and climate policies. This call aims to document, celebrate, and amplify the stories of how radio supports communities in preparing for, responding to, and recovering from disasters. UNDRR and its partners extend an invitation to broadcasters, unions, community organizations, and media practitioners worldwide to submit radio resilience case studies for inclusion in a global publication. Case studies may address one or more of the following themes: radio as an emergency lifeline, early warning, crisis communications, and post-disaster recovery; radio as a tool for inclusion, reaching at-risk groups, people with disabilities, and those without internet connectivity; radio as a dialogue platform, community call-in shows, interactive formats, and participatory disaster preparedness; innovation in radio for resilience, creative programming approaches, integration of new technologies and radio devices, or hybrid radio digital solutions; and radio and climate resilience, supporting adaptation strategies, preparedness for extreme weather and climate change communication. Selected case studies will be featured in the Global Radio for Resilience publication to be launched in 2026. The report will compile compelling stories, highlight innovations and best practices, and provide actionable recommendations for policymakers, donors, and media stakeholders. The window for submission closed on November the 1st, 2025. This is a good idea. I think it's helping understand more how radio can reach in different situations, be it disaster relief, be it whatever is happening in your community. I think it's a pretty good idea to promote radio as a first line of communications.
I like the fact that they point out specifically reaching communities or people without internet connectivity. Yes, there are people out there who do not have the internet, as much as some people would like you to believe, like, wow, everybody has internet. Well, no, they don't. And there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't have out there, and that's one of them. But radio is something that's very simple, inexpensive, and very effective at reaching masses of people. So as you said, I think this is a really great initiative. I'll be really interested in seeing the document when it's finally released, and hopefully people read it and understand it.
Yep, definitely.
We sadly have some more violence in radio out there. We have too many stories like this, and it's really sad. This one comes from Radio Info Asia. Radio commentator shot dead in the Philippines. A radio commentator was shot dead in the Albay province of the Philippines on Monday. Noel Belen Samar, 54, a reporter affiliated with local Kadunong ITV and DWIZ, was shot 4 times by unidentified gunmen while traveling on a bike on the Maharlika Highway. He was rushed to a local hospital and died the next day after surgery, confirmed by a Presidential Task Force on Media Security, a state body tasked with investigating media murders. That's scary that they have a task force to study just that to begin with. Samar's family suspected that the attack may have been work-related due to his reputation as a fearless radio commentator. In a statement, they condemned the brazen attack and announced the creation of a special task force to ensure a thorough, impartial, and swift investigation. Samar is the 8th radio journalist to be killed in the Philippines since President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took office in June of 2022. Since the restoration of democracy in 1986, at least 147 journalists have been killed in the Philippines, and in 2025, the country ranks 116th out of 180 countries in the Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index, and ranks 9th on their most recent Impunity Index, a global ranking of countries where journalists' murderers are most likely to go free. One of the dangerous countries, and the number is really high in journalists, not just radio, but print reporters, television reporters, what have you. People don't like what you're saying. You're putting your life at risk too many times.
So we have some amateur radio DXPEDITIONS and special events.
Lots of special stations that'll be coming on the air with some very adventurous ham radio operators traveling to some interesting parts of the world. First, from LESOTHO, Wolfgang, Hotel Bravo 9, Charlie Charlie Sierra, will be operating from time to time as 7 Papa 8 Echo Alpha until throughout November. And he'll be at Thaba Tseka, mainly on 15 meters using CW and SSB, and perhaps 17, 12, and 10 meters also. So that's an interesting one.
Bolivia, a Argentinian team, will again be operating as Charlie Papa 7 Delta X-Ray between October 31st and November 10th, and the operation on various bands using all modes.
The Solomon Islands, Bernard Delta Lima 2 Gulf Alpha Gulf is once again operating as Hotel 44 Mike Sierra from the Manaque village until November the 25th. He'll be operating 80 through 6 meters using SSB and FT8.
From Palau, Yutaka, Juliet Hotel 1, Mike Lima Oscar, and Chusuke, Juliet Radio 1, Fox Kilo Romeo, will once again be operating as Tango 88 Hotel Romeo and Tango 88 Tango Juliet between November 1st and November 6th. And they will be operating from 80 to 6 meters using SSB and FT8.
In Mali, Jeff, Kilo 1 Mike Bravo, will be active as Tango Zulu 4 Alpha Mike right through until December, operating 80 through 6 meters using CW and SSB.
From the Marshall Islands, John, K5GDE, is operating during his spare time as Victor 73 Juliet Whiskey from Kwajalein Atoll until January 2026. Operation so far between 40 and 10 meters using FT8.
In the Falkland Islands, Hakel, Delta Lima 7 Hotel Whiskey, will be operating as Victor Papa 8 Tango Hotel Whiskey from November 1st until November 21st using SSB and FT8 on various bands.
The UK sovereign base in Cyprus, Dave, Golf 4 Whiskey X-Ray Juliet, will once again be operating as Zulu Charlie 4 Romeo Hotel from November the 3rd to the 7th. The activity is from 40 to 6 meters, and they'll be using some CW, SSB, FT4, and FT8.
And finally, from the Chatham Islands, Stan, Lima Zulu 1 Gulf Charlie, will be operating as Zulu Lima 7 / Lima Zulu 1 Gulf Charlie between November 3rd and November the 20th. He'll be operating from 160 to 10 meters and using 2 stations with CW, SSB, and FT4 and FT8.
And we have some breaking news. We have Mike, Victor Echo 2 X-Ray Bravo, will be active from Iqaluit, Nunavut on the Baffin Islands, which is NA047. And he will be active as Victor Yankee 0 Zulu Oscar Oscar. This will happen from today, November 2nd, up to November 7th. So he will likely operate on 40 or 20 meters. And the 2 modes he's going to use are Morse code, CW, and SSB. You want a QSL? The QSL will be via Victor Echo 2 X-Ray Bravo. Good luck with that. And we are out of time.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a happy Halloween. Maybe you heard some pirates. Let us know what you were listening to if you were tuning around. And check out some of these interesting ham operations coming up over the next little while. If you'd like to contact us, radioreport@yahoo.com is our email address. We're live streaming and archived at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group is International Radio Report. We invite you to join us. Join the group. You can post messages there and interact with other listeners. And our YouTube channel is where you can find our show at any time you like. Go to youtube.com/@IRR. You'll find our most recent show and archived shows there as well. Have a great week, everybody. And we'll talk to you again next Sunday morning at 10:30 Eastern Time, 15:30 UTC, here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Have a great week. Bye-bye for now.
Have a great week, everyone.
The World at 6, a major news program from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.